Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. Welcome to episode 183, Strategies for Navigating University Service Requirements. This is an episode I've been wanting to do for a really long time because many academic positions, whether they're tenured or non-tenured, tend to come with more service responsibilities than they used to. They might take the form of required committee meetings. You might be assigned to 2 or 3 committees a year as a faculty member. You might be an administrator and you've got service that's related to your administrative position. So for the record, for this episode, I'm not really making the distinction between paid type of service, which can overlap with administrative service, where maybe you have release time from teaching, and then just straight up service. So this particular episode is going to focus mostly on the time-consuming nature of committee meetings and then all the work that's associated with other types of service like mentoring or making sure that you're working with specific groups of students. Maybe it's not a committee per se, but it's maybe 5 extra hours that you do tutoring math or whatever the area is. And so for today's episode, what we're going to do is just talk through university service requirements and just some ways to kind of navigate the time pressures associated with this, and also to talk through the strategy of making sure that you're not doing so much service that you're in danger of not getting your required publications, or your teaching is taking a hit because you're spending all these times on committees. And for this particular episode, I want to use some of the examples from a lot of years that I've had training people in tenure and promotion to navigate faculty manual requirements. So I've done this both at my own institution, but I've done it for other institutions as a consultant, and we do it all the time with Defend, Publish, and Lead, where we try to help clients figure out, okay, my university says I need to do 2 committees per year, but I heard the norm is really 3. Should I do 3? That kind of thing. So just some general guidelines that I tend to tell faculty that are not tenured yet. So let's assume for this episode that no one's tenured and you don't have a whole lot of choice in the matter. Maybe you have some choice, but maybe not as much as you would like. One of the things that I try to say about committees is that I think many new faculty members don't necessarily know what committees on their campus do, and they don't necessarily know what kind of time commitments they are. So one of the things that I try to recommend to faculty that I know need the time for writing, they need the time for teaching, and they're not going to have as much time to just, meet every single week for a committee that maybe has a pretty heavy load, is I try to steer faculty towards committees that have kind of busy periods and slower periods, or they tend to meet just a couple of times a year. So maybe the work is intense, but it's in clusters. Committees I tend to recommend folks avoid are ones that have a meeting every single week, particularly if it's at a very inconvenient time, because it can add stress for a lot of reasons. I know as a tenure track faculty member, I did get stuck with a committee that met at 8 a.m. And it was, I can't remember if it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday, but it was really difficult for me to get a child on the bus, speed to work, make it in time to be at this committee meeting. And so every Tuesday or every Wednesday, I always had that stress of, how am I going to do this? And it was unnecessary. So, had I known a little bit more about committees and a little bit more about when they regularly met, I probably wouldn't have been put on that one. I would have found something else maybe. Again, sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you're just put on one and you have no control. But that would be one of the things that I would recommend maybe first off. And if you're a faculty member, you can take a look and just see what are what are the committees that are available? What do they do? It's also great to ask around for people in your department what committees are ones that maybe match with your interest. So that's another place that you can look. For me, I tend to worry less about interest and more about the time pressure. So one of the committees that I enjoyed that exists on most campuses is I actually did enjoy serving on a committee that was about appeals for all kinds of academic issues, like somebody failing a class or plagiarism, because those problems tended to get clustered at the very end of the semester and sometimes at the very beginning of the semester. So even though I was really busy during finals week and the week after, which maybe is not ideal, that particular committee, we'd have 2-3 months where we wouldn't do anything, and then I'd be really, really busy. But then I could check the box that I'd been on that committee. Another way to kind of think through committees would be, of course, interests, but maybe what you could contribute that's something that's already in your wheelhouse. So one of the committees that I did, we have undergraduate faculty and we have graduate faculty with at that time, we had 2 different governing bodies. And I knew that with at least one, with the graduate stuff, I was in the middle of working on developing my own graduate program. I knew I'd need to be at the meetings anyway to get my program through. And so, because I also knew I needed a leadership position to be promoted to full professor rank, I knew that that would be ideal. If I would become the graduate council chair, that would be great because I would chair a meeting I already had to be at. I'd have the leadership role of doing it. But at the same time, I'd also have the inner workings of how do I get some of my curriculum through? How do I make sure my program, is going to make it? So sometimes you can even pick a committee strategically based on how it might work for you in the future. It might be something that you want to do. Some other things that I would recommend just in general about committee type university service, when somebody asks for a time, try to weigh in. So this is something that I talk with the new faculty at my institution all the time, that sometimes they just say, okay, they just accept whatever meeting shows up on their schedule, even if it's not at a convenient time. And so often this happens where maybe that committee meeting lands smack in the middle of your really nice writing time. So one of the tips we always tell faculty, both within the company and also in my own institution, is to block out that writing time immediately after class. So actually a good tip for this particular episode, which will be hitting in the middle of the summer of 2024, go in your calendar for fall right now and block out your writing time. And also, don't call it writing time on your calendar if it's a publicly shared calendar. I mean, you can mark things as private and all that, but you can call it something else if you want to, but whatever you call it, don't call it anything that sounds like it can be scheduled over. It sounds like something that's a throwaway. So, if these committees, and I know I have already started getting committee invitations for different meetings for my fall calendar. And for a couple of them, because I have not put in my writing time yet, I'm putting maybe temporarily on those email invites that come through. And that's a reminder to me that I need to follow my own advice and schedule in my own writing time just to make sure that I've got the time blocked out that I want before I let committees do it. Sometimes you have no choice. So if you're on the tenure track, you may not have a whole lot of choice in the matter, but at least you can see early where different spots for writing might appear. Another thing that you can do is sometimes you will end up on a committee as a new member. Don't be shy about proposing a time for the committee to meet, especially if the committee kind of is sitting back and waiting for somebody to take the lead, as so often committees are like that. You could propose that. You could also propose having, say, a quick email meeting instead of having a regular face-to-face meeting or a Zoom meeting, because sometimes part of the problem with the meetings is that they take a whole hour of your time on your calendar, but they're only 40 minutes. And sometimes that extra 20 minutes is kind of a bonus, but you want to make sure that you have a real understanding of what kind of time is available. So those are some things that can help. The other thing that I would do is try to find someone who knows what committees are worth more than others, because at least at my institution, and I know at many others from the criteria that I've reviewed for tenure and promotion, for folks that are now getting into applying for associate professor or applying for full professor, a lot of faculty manuals require that leadership is shown. So you might be the chair of the committee, not just a member, or you might need to be on something more like your university faculty senate or something like that instead of just a department committee. So knowing what is required for university service, that seems common sense, but in a lot of the concern about scholarship and teaching and things like that, when you take a new faculty position, sometimes service is something you don't find out about till it's too late. This would be well worth your time to spend, say 30 minutes or 20 minutes just looking at that one part of the manual to see what you actually have to do. Another thing that I know goes into university service that is time intensive can be student advising. At some smaller institutions, and certainly at many of the small liberal arts colleges, where personal advising, where a student is with an advisor in a one-on-one kind of meeting situation, that's been the case at my institution for many years. It is no longer the case. That it can happen in a couple different ways, but sometimes those advising weeks, when it's time for scheduling, you're busy. You lose 2 to 3 weeks out of a 16-week semester to get all those students in your office to do that advising. So that doesn't apply to everybody with one-on-one advising, but for many, many of our small college faculty, that's the norm. So you have to actually meet with your student in person or on Zoom. So one of the things that I know, just to kind of help with strategizing time with that kind of commitment, is I try to have things set up ahead of time before an advising week hits. So I no longer have that. But when I did, I could have as many as, say, 15 to 20 students I needed to talk to in a 2-week period. So, of course, I had a calendar scheduler, and before that, I had kind of a sign-up sheet outside my office that they could sign up. But one of the things that helped for me is that I had information I needed to tell all 15 of them. So one thing that was so worth my time was just spending a morning, I don't even think it took a morning, maybe 2 hours, of getting everything they needed on one piece of paper, like the same things I needed to tell everybody. I would put study tips, all that kind of stuff on there. And then that way I had a handout I could give all of them when they walked in. So it was worth doing that 2 hours, because then it cut down the actual time I was talking to the advisee, and they had other places to go. So for people that are really experienced with advising, a lot of them have spaces, internet spaces or portals, or like a Google Drive folder, or things that have resources. So they don't have to always tell the student all the things. They can just point them to some of the resources. And of course, sometimes we still have to tell the students anyway, but that could be one way to think through how to save time. Another thing that I would say with university service, when we're talking about strategies, is the service is no good if nobody knows that you did anything. So one of the difficulties people find when they're trying to prepare their tenure and promotion dossiers, or a non-tenure promotion dossier, might be that you did some work on this committee besides just showing up for a meeting. So minutes, of course, are super helpful. They can, minutes will show that you were at the meeting, but I like to tell my own faculty, be chatty in a meeting or two. So that way your name will show up in the minutes a lot, and then you can highlight your name. And then that would, that could show that you're participating. You're not just sitting there. Another thing that helps with committees is if you are creating anything. A lot of times when you're submitting a tenure and promotion dossier, you have to submit some type of an artifact. And so it's difficult for university service to prove that you did it. So a couple of different things could be that on a committee, maybe somebody needs to create some bylaws. I know one thing I had to do was create some graduate program outcomes with some help, and I had to develop kind of what that draft looked like. When I reviewed student appeals, I could show I read, 58 appeals this fall semester. Here's the email that shows that I got 58 appeals. And here's the email back when I submitted my required paperwork to show that I'd read them. So there's a lot of different ways to show that you've completed the work. And that way, actually, the time you're spending on service is worth it. A final thing I might recommend would be to think through what kind of committees would you find valuable and you won't just detest going there every week. I had one committee, I will not name it, that I was on it because I thought I would be interested. But when I got to that committee, it was more personalities. I really didn't enjoy going to that one. I had a lot of stress just kind of being on there and watching some faculty infighting. Sometimes that happens. And for me, this was still when I was on the tenure track. Another committee would have been just as fine in that spot. So one thing that I was very proactive about is I knew I didn't want to just stick it out on this one committee. I wanted to try to move to another one. So I talked to faculty that were on the other committee. I talked with my dean to figure out how I might be able to run for a different committee, because many of these are elected on my campus and on others. But I was a little proactive about trying to fix a situation that wasn't really great. With service, a lot of times I think people just say, well, I don't care. Like, I got so many other things going on. I just don't care. But the more that you can do to adjust to make sure that your service is not too time consuming, it's somewhat enjoyable, it's something that you can compartmentalize and you can get it completed. Um, One other thing that I might say to close this episode would be it's wonderful if you can find a way to turn that service into some scholarship or into something for teaching. Overlap is really amazing. I have an article in Inside Higher Ed called Telling Your Tenure Story. I think that's what it's called. I'll put a link in the show notes. But one of the things at my institution and at others, um, they have now a requirement that you really should be telling some kind of a narrative that crosses your teaching, your service, your scholarship. How do those areas connect? And so the more strategic you are about kind of picking your university service, thinking about how it fits in your narrative, making sure it's not going to be too time consuming and so on, all of that can be a really powerful way to then think through, well, I'm doing this one thing on a service committee. So for example, I wrote some graduate program outcomes. I haven't done it, but if I wanted to, I could probably write an article for a higher education journal about creating those outcomes and what went into it. So another way to kind of stretch your scholarship or your writing possibilities could be looking to your service areas. And of course, we're happy to help navigate any kind of time management challenges with service, because a lot of times these are very specific to an institution. We are here to help. On a note that has nothing to do with service responsibilities, but because I had room in this episode, I wanted to make it a mission in our next couple of episodes to show a little bit of behind the scenes, what you might get with the Textbook and Academic Authors Association membership. As you know, that's our only sponsor. I don't like ads. I don't really want them on my podcast. So this is the only sponsor we have, and it's because I believe in this organization. I think it's fabulous. But I wanted to show you because I think hearing about it, so what? Like I know, like if somebody told me about a membership, it would probably fall off my radar as soon as I listened to an episode. But for me, I wanted to just show what's actually in here. So if you are a member, there's a little section that says resources. And what I'm going to do in the next couple episodes is just show a quick show and tell of the types of resources that are out there. So in Textbook and Academic Authors Association, they have a section once you are a member. Membership is extremely cheap right now. Check our show notes. You can find out the discount code to get a discount for joining. It is the cheapest membership that I have out of all my academic organizations and scholarly journals, hands down. So definitely worth any kind of cost for that. But if you're a member, you log in, you go to resources, you will see these 5 buttons. So anybody on YouTube, you can watch me do this. I have this going on screen. There's a get informed, a get connected, get involved, get inspired, and get funded. So we're going to just kind of work through what's behind these in the different weeks of this podcast. But the get informed, to me, this would be the thing that I would academic author. And so once you get in this section, you can see all kinds of stuff. So I've talked about some of these resources before, and I guarantee I will do a lot more. But the things that I think are the most helpful right now are 3. One would be you can watch presentations that the organization has already done on demand. So if I would click that link, I won't now, I'll probably do an episode on that specifically, but there's everything in there about negotiating an author contract, about time management, about writing your first book. I mean, I can't even tell you how many webinars are in there, and I probably have watched maybe 1/10 of the ones in there, and I'm pretty dedicated at looking at it. There's new ones added every time something is run. So all of these become available to you. I've also mentioned there's a spot to browse templates and samples. By far, this is what drew me to this organization, because somebody had told me that they had all kinds of templates for writing in it. And that's how I ended up with Textbook and Academic Authors in the first place. I knew these resources existed, so I joined so I could get a look at them. They are fabulous. There's so many great things in there. There's writing logs. There's ways to track collaborative work with an author, revision checklists. There's so many things in there to take a look at. So that one is really great. Another one that I think is really helpful is the free ebooks. There is one ebook in particular. It's called Writing and Publishing Academic Journal Articles. That is a really great ebook that's available, but there's also a good one in there about tips for successful co-authoring. I know we've done some episodes on collaboration, but that continues to be a sticky point. So I just wanted to make sure that people know what's all in here. It's totally worth it. It's just one registration fee and you get to get everything in here. So if you want to get a discounted membership for the year, look at our show notes. You can get the code for that. And happy writing this week.